of Milarepa for you to have a look at. Here's the first one. There he is. So you've probably seen pictures of Milarepa before. This is quite a nice one, I think. You see he has a little moustache. He's rather Padmasambhava-like there. And of course, he's got his ear, his hand to his ear, which means, I suppose, that he's singing. There were Buddhas and Bodhisattvas above him, and there's disciples around him, both lay and monastic. Okay, let's have the other. And the
What's he sat on, Ratnaguna? May I ask, what is he sat on?
Pardon?
May I ask, what is he sat on?
Oh, I didn't really look at that. Let's have a look. Don't know. Some kind of animal.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's have the next one. Yes, above him, I think that's probably his teacher, Marpa. And above him, there's a Buddha or Bodhisattva. I don't know who that would be. Yeah, and you can see he's in the mountains. That's a lovely one. Oh, the reason I picked this one because he's green, and the reason he's green is because he used to live on nettles. He ate nettles, so he became green because he ate so many nettles. Okay, and the next one, Darren, final one. That's gorgeous, isn't it? Look at those eyes. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, thank you, Darren. We can come back to me now. Okay, so we're going to look at part of a chapter from the 100,000 Songs of Milarepa. Now, I've got this one I've had for many, many years. It was published 65 years ago. Good morning, Vajrayana. Welcome. And it's in 2 volumes. It's in 2 volumes. If you don't already have a copy, it's going to be a bit expensive for you to get a copy. They're about 20 odd pounds each now, secondhand. 65 years ago that was. And there's a new one just come out in the last couple of years. New translation. So what this means was that translation over there was the only one for about 65 years, the only one we had, and it was published when the early days of Triratna. Well, probably before, actually, wasn't it? Before the early days of Triratna. So we had it. Everyone had a copy of this, and Bhante did many, many seminars on this book. It says 100,000 songs of Milarepa. That's a bit of an exaggeration. The Tibetan title is Milagrubum, and Bum, B-O-M, it's an unfortunate word, B-O-M, means, it can mean 100,000, but it also means collection. So it's like the collection of Milarepa's songs. And I believe there aren't actually nowhere near 100,000, which won't surprise you, but somebody has counted them. Yeah, there's in the volume that I just showed you, there's 392 songs, but not all by Milarepa. Sometimes Milarepa sings to someone and they sing back. So in all, 322 songs by Milarepa, which is still a lot of songs, isn't it? And what happens is you get a chapter with a story. You know, somebody meets Milarepa or he meets them, and they're either willing to listen to him and become a disciple, or they're against him in some way, and they have a debate. And sometimes the debate turns magical. You know, oh, I can walk through that wall, and Milarepa does it too, and you know, that kind of thing. So Milarepa, he was we're talking Tibet here, of course, and he was around circa 1051 to 1135. I'll say that 1051 to 1135 approximately. And I'm just going to read you a little bit from the foreword of the 100,000 Songs. This is a foreword by someone called Peter Gruber. who was a friend of, oh, I didn't tell you who the translator was of this one, Gama C.C. Chang, who was a scholar and translator, but also a devotee of Milarepa. He practiced within Milarepa's tradition. Anyway, his friend, Peter Gruber, says, I can perhaps speak now for myself as to why, among the many great religious classics, the Milagrubum is a personal favourite. To name just a few, I may say first of all that I found this book to be an inexhaustible fountainhead of inspiration, an immense treasury of spiritual teachings, a repository of yogic instructions, a guide on the Bodhi path, and above all, an unfailing friend of the sincere devotee. Secondly, it provides inside information on the religious life of the Tibetan people, laymen, yogis, and monks alike, presenting a very vivid picture of their spiritual problems, strivings, and accomplishments. In this book, the profoundest ideas and teachings of Buddhism are revealed in 61 fascinating stories presented in simple language. The reading, therefore, is extremely pleasant and interesting. So, yeah, it's a great book. It's worth £27, to buy one of the volumes. I don't think you would regret it. Now, what we're going to look at is chapter 12 of volume 1, which is very dear to my heart partly because it's a great chapter, but also because it is the chapter that Bhante Sangharakshita decided to study with us on my ordination retreat. So here we are. It was held at Broomhouse Farm, Norfolk, on the 12th and 13th of June, 1976. Some of you I can see were alive at that point, and I think some of you probably weren't. So there's a list of people who were there, and I'm included, Gary Hennessy, because, at that point, I was still a Mitra, Gary Hennessy, and Richard Hutton, who was also a Mitra, and I became Ratnaguna and he became Padmavajra. And so we studied this text together over 2 days with Bhante, so it's really, really important to us both. The chapter 12, Gama C.C. Chang calls it The Shepherd's Search for Mind, but actually there are two stories. The first story, Milarepa comes down from the mountains and he's asking for food. We find out on another occasion that the only reasons he does that is really to contact people, to teach them the Dharma. He makes coming down for food as a pretext. And in the first part of the chapter, an old couple really take to Milarepa and they want to adopt him. They feel sorry for him. He's got nothing, so they want to adopt him. They say, we'll adopt you. We'll give you the land. You can farm the land there, and we'll find a nice young woman for you, and you'll be happy. And of course, he says, no, I'm not interested. But it's a gorgeous little incident, actually. But then the second part is what we're going to do today. And I'll just now it's a few pages long, so we can't do what I've done the last two talks, which is look in a line by line way at the text, and this line means this and so on. We can't do that. It's a bit too long. And last night I was Sia phoned me last night and she said, how's it going? I said, I really don't know how to give this talk yet, because I was looking at, I think, 3 pages. What can I do with this? How can I put this across? So what I've decided to do is, first of all, tell the story. And then we'll go back and look, see what much time we've got left and look at some of the teachings in a bit more detail. I hope we've got time for that. And in doing that, we can look at there are many different ways of reading a text, as I've said before. And one way is look for teachings, and another way is to look for people. And when we just go through the story together, we're looking at people interacting, how Milarepa interacted with the shepherd and how the shepherd interacted with Milarepa. So what we're seeing is 2 people meet and one of them becomes the other one's disciple in a very short space of time. And then what happens then? And so you get an idea of how Milarepa related to people. and how people related to him too, some people anyway. So we do that. So that's the human side of it. And then we'll go back and we'll look at one or two of the songs, one or two of the teachings that Milarepa gives to the young shepherd. So I'll just read the very first part of it. And the whole thing lasts over a period. So there's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. This is why I can't do a line by line account. After day 4 comes a whole week where the shepherd disappears. And then there's more time passes. And then eventually the shepherd comes to live with Milarepa. So it's all over quite a long period of time. So day one. One day, 2 young shepherds came to him, Milarepa. The younger one asked, "Dear Lama, have you a companion?" Milarepa replied, "Yes, I have." "Who is he?" "His name is friend Bodhiheart." So Bodhicitta, that means. "Where is he now?" "In the house of the universal seed consciousness." "What do you mean by that?" "My own body." So that's their initial meeting. So you remember a couple of months ago, I gave a talk where the Buddha meets Super Buddha the leper, and he takes some time in getting the leper Super Buddha into a fit state to really hear the Dharma, the Kala Chitta, the ready mind. None of that here. He doesn't bother with any of that. So what he's doing, he's playing with an idea, which is the young shepherd is coming with another guide. So they're friends, they're companions. So they meet Milarepa and he says, "Haven't you got a companion? You know, in other words, you must be really lonely." And Milarepa's reply is, "Well, no, because I've got a friend and his name is Bodhicitta." And the shepherd thinks that's somebody's name. So, which it could be the name of an order member, couldn't it? There you are, Sia. Maybe that one for you. Milarepa just plays with this idea, and there is a text. I was looking at for it this morning. I couldn't find it. It's somewhere in the Pali Canon. I think it's in the Majjhima Nikaya, where the Buddha is talking about one of his chief disciples, Sariputta, and he says that Sariputta is a man of wisdom, and he enumerates different kinds of wisdom. There are 6 or 7 or 8 different kinds of wisdom. There's piercing wisdom and there's broad wisdom. And one of them is hasapanya, which hasa is to smile or to laugh. So it's the laughing wisdom. So Sariputta has the laughing wisdom. And I think of that when in here, because Milarepa's playing. He's just, oh yeah, I've got a friend. His name's Bodhicitta. So now he's playing, and so the shepherd says, "Well, where is he?" He says, "He's in this universal seed consciousness, the Alaya Vijnana." And so then he says, "What's that?" And he says, "It's in my body." So he's got a friend who's in his body. So then the young shepherd, we'll find out his name later, is really interested in this. But the other boy, the elder one of the 2, says, "Lama, we'd better go as you cannot guide us." The other translation is a bit stronger than that. He says, "We can't trust you. You know, you're not a proper teacher." So he's not interested anymore. And what I find interesting about that is he disappears then. He's not in the text anymore. And Milarepa doesn't try to bring him round or anything. He just lets him go. Because there are some people who are just prejudiced. They don't want to know. So there's no point in trying to bring them round, I suppose. But anyway, but the younger one said, "Do you mean this consciousness is mind itself and that the physical body is the house of the mind?" "Yes, that is correct." So then the boy, so he's a boy, he's young. He says, "We know that although a house usually belongs only to one person, many people can enter into it. So we always find a number of people living in one house. In the same way, is there only one mind in the body, or are there many? If there are many, how do they live together?" They've just met. They've just said a few words to each other, And suddenly they're in this deep metaphysical conversation about the mind. Is there one mind or is there many minds? Good question, isn't it? It feels to me like I've got a number of minds, actually. Some of them pretty good, they're pretty cheerful and, somewhat wise in some senses. And then other minds I've got are a bit grumpy and a bit stupid. I suppose it's the same with you. So Milarepa says, well, as to whether there is only one mind in the body or many, you had better find that out for yourself. And the boy says, revealed one, I will try. So they go. The two boys go. So, I forgot. I'm not supposed to stick around with this, am I? That's the first day. So, day 2. Next morning, the younger boy returned and said to Milarepa, Dear Lama, last night I tried to find out what my mind is and how it works. What a brilliant young man. He really is taking this on board, isn't he? He's interested suddenly. He's a shepherd, and suddenly he's interested in the mind and how many there are and where it is and so on. I observed it carefully and I found that I only have one mind. Even though one wants to, one cannot kill this mind. However much one wishes to dismiss it, it will not go away. Have you found that? It just won't go, will it? Shut up, mind. No. If one tries to catch it, it cannot be grasped. Nor can it be held by pressing it. If you want it to remain, it will not stay. If you release it, it will not go. And it goes on like this. We might come back to this in a bit more detail later. It is something illuminating, aware, wide awake, yet incomprehensible. In short, it is hard to say what the mind really is. Please be kind enough to explain the meaning of the mind. And then Milarepa sings a song. I wish I could sing it myself, but I don't have a tune. But there's a contemporary Tibetan teacher called Khenpo. What's his name now? Khenpo Gyatso Tsultrim, I think. Probably Vajrayana knows who it is. Maybe not. But he's got quite a following, and he's a follower of Milarepa, and he and his disciples set Milarepa's songs to music and they sing them. And if I can, later on at the end of this talk, if I can figure out how to do it, I'm not sure whether I can because I'm not the host. We'll go to YouTube and we'll listen to one of these songs. But anyway, he sings now. Listen to me, dear shepherd, the protector. By merely hearing about sugar's taste, sweetness cannot be experienced. Though one's mind may understand what sweetness is, it cannot experience directly. Only the tongue can know it. In the same way, one cannot see in full the nature of mind, though he may have a glimpse of it if it has been pointed out by others. If one relies not on this one glimpse, but continues searching for the nature of mind, he will see it fully in the end. Dear shepherd, in this way you should observe your mind. So this is an important song because he's talking about the pointing out of the mind. So here we are. This is a Vajrayana text. The first text we looked at was Shravakayana. It was from the Pali Canon. Last time we met, it was from the Mahayana tradition, one of the early Mahayana sutras. This is Vajrayana or Tantra, and specifically, it's the Maha Mudra. This is what we're talking about now. So the Maha Mudra, the great seal or the great signifier or the great mudra, is a form of, it's a way of practicing Buddhism where you try and find the mind, and you find that it's actually, reminds me of the name of Vajradeva's book, actually, Uncontrived. The mind is actually really natural and open and relaxed in itself, and we kind of mess with it, so it's not. And so you need a guru to point out the real nature of mind. We'll go back into that when we come back and look at the teachings in a bit more detail. Okay. So he asks, the boy says, can you give me the pointing out instruction? And this evening I will look into it, and I shall return tomorrow and tell you the result. So he's a great disciple, isn't he? He's really going for it. Milarepa replied, very well. When you get home, try to find out the colour of the mind. The colour. That's why this talk is called The Colour of the Mind. What is the colour of the mind? Is it white, red, or what? What is its shape? Is it oblong, round, or what? Also, try to locate where in your body it dwells. That's day 2. Day 3. The next morning, when the sun rose, the shepherd drove the sheep before him and came to Milarepa, who asked, did you try last night to find out what the mind is like? The boy replied, yes, I did. What does it look like? Okay, we won't go into all that because it's more of the same. Hopefully we'll come back to that and look in a bit more detail. Then there's another song. He sings another song. Again, we won't look at that. Yeah. But basically in this song, he says, let's just read you the last few lines. Surely you want to reach the other shore. Surely you long for the city of well-being and liberation. If you desire to go, dear child, I can show the way to you and give you the instructions. So this is something that I've noticed with this text. They don't know each other in the first day, but at the end of the first day, the boy calls Milarepa revered one. This is after 5 minutes. He calls him revered one. So he's already got faith in Milarepa. Next morning, he comes and says, dear Lama, so dear teacher. Don't know if you noticed, but the first song that Milarepa sings him, listen to me, dear shepherd. So there's affection there. Thank you, Vajrayana. There we are. Jim Scott is the songwriter, yeah. Dear shepherd, yeah. So there's this affection there between them, yeah. So dear child, he says. The shepherd replied, certainly, dear Lama, I have made up my mind to seek it. Milarepa then asked, what is your name? This is day 3. Then he asks him his name. So it's not important, I suppose. Names aren't that important. What's your name? Sangye Jap. Sangye Jap means, let's have a look. There's a footnote. No, it doesn't really say, but I do know from the other translation what it means, but we'll come back to that. How old are you? He says, 16. So now we know he's a 16-year-old boy. Thereupon, the Jetson, that's an honorific name for Milarepa, gave him the teaching of taking refuge, explaining briefly its benefits and significance. So this is interesting. They meet. They immediately go into Maha Mudra. They're talking about the nature of mind. The Buddha's asking the boy to look into the nature of mind. 3 days later, he tells him he has to go for refuge to the 3 jewels. Yeah. So, you know, we've got in the way we usually do it is people go for refuge and then to the 3 jewels. And then later they look at the wisdom teachings. Here it's the other way around. He's looking immediately at the wisdom teachings, and he says, basically, if you want to go any further, now you have to commit. So this reminds me of a man that I often mention in my talks, Wilfred Cantwell Smith, who was a Christian lay minister in Canada many years ago. He's been dead a long time now, but who wrote a wonderful book called Faith and Belief, the difference between them. And in there, he defines faith as insight. It has 2 parts, insight and positive response. So faith begins with an insight, but then it has to be followed up with a yes, a positive response, that now you're going to live your life according to that insight. So this is the order in which this is coming, faith followed by insight. He then said, when you get back home this evening, do not stop reciting the prayer, the refuges and precepts. Actually just the refuges, isn't it? And in the meantime, try to find out which takes refuge, the mind or the body, and tell me the result tomorrow. So he's messing now. He's mixing up the prime acts of being a Buddhist, the thing that helps you to motivates you to go, going for refuge to the three jewels, he's messing that with mashing up in a way with wisdom. Okay, recite this. I go for refuge to the Buddha, I go for refuge to the Dharma, I go for refuge to the Sangha. And at the same time, ask yourself, who is doing that? Where is doing it? Is it your mind or your body or what? So a wisdom teaching along with the going for refuge. Day 4. Next morning, the shepherd came and said to Milarepa, "Dear Lama, last night I tried to find out which of these two takes refuge, the body or mind. I found that it is neither of them." So he then goes on to talk about, he's looking at his body and he says it's not coming from there. And then he's looking at his mind, and it gets really quite metaphysical then, and a bit difficult to follow, because he's splitting the mind up into past, present and future. And if you go for refuge now, that's the present mind, but the past mind didn't, and the future mind just hasn't. So you can't really say the mind because it leaves out the past and the future, and other strange things like this, which I can't completely follow. But at the end he says, "Pray, my teacher, please give me an explanation. I submit everything to you. You know everything. You know what I need." So he's given himself now to Milarepa on day 4. Milarepa sings a song, a long one. Okay, I'm just going to read you the first verse of this song. "I sincerely pray to my guru, who is Marpa, who realized the truth of non-ego. I pray with my body, words and mind. I pray with great faith and sincerity. Pray, bless me and my disciples. Enable us to realize the truth of non-ego. Pity us and deliver us from the plight of ego clinging." So he often begins his songs like that. He's evoking his teachers and asking them to bless him so that the teacher comes through him. We had this last time we met, didn't we? Looking at the beginning of the Ratnaguna Samsayagata, where you've got the lake, Anapatapta, and the lake is the Dharma, and it's coming out in 4 rivers, and the bodhisattvas are those rivers, and they're like conduits of the Dharma. So Milarepa is making it clear that everything that's coming from him is coming through him from his teachers. He then says that the last lines of that song are, "Follow my example and for 12 years meditate." 12, that's a very specific number of years, isn't it? 12 years meditate. "Then you will understand the nature of mind. Think well on this, dear boy." The shepherd said, "I offer you my body and my head. Please make me understand my own mind definitely and clearly." The Jetson then thought, "I shall see whether this child can really practice." And then he said, "First pray to the 3 precious ones, the 3 jewels, and then visualize an image of the Buddha in front of your nose." Thus Milarepa gave the shepherd the instruction of concentration and sent him away. So he's given him meditation practice now, praying to the 3 jewels, go for refuge, and then imagine the Buddha right in front of you. That's what he's got to do. That's when the boy disappears. No sign of him for 7 days. On the 7th day, his father, the boy's father, came to Milarepa saying, "Dear Lama, my son has not come home for a week. This is very unusual." Wondering whether he was lost, I inquired of the other shepherds who had been with him. They all said that he had come to you for the Dharma and thought he had then gone home. "But where is he?" "Well, he was here," replied Milarepa, "but he has not come back for 7 days." "Where is he?" The father was deeply grieved and wept bitterly. Anyway, search for the boy. Eventually they find him. He's in a clay pit, sitting upright with his eyes wide open, staring in front of him. They asked him, "What are you doing here?" He replied, "I'm practicing the meditation my guru taught me." "Well, why haven't you returned home for 7 days?" "I've only been meditating a little while. You must be joking." And then his father says, "Look at the sun." And he looks, and it's earlier in the day than when he started meditating. So then he begins to realize something strange has happened. So he's been in deep samadhi for 7 days and 7 nights. Now you might think that is impossible or hard to believe. But there's an interesting section in Bante's memoirs, the time when he was in Kalimpong, that lovely one, beautiful memoirs. And a young boy comes, he's got this little kind of hermitage, and there's him and another monk with him. And this young boy comes to stay with them. And he's really talented. And they teach him to meditate. And he sits down to meditate. He just hours on end. He's in samadhi. And eventually his parents come and take him away. You know, they don't want him to take up the spiritual life. They never see or hear him again. But you get people like that, apparently, who just take to it like a duck to water. Anyway, from then on, the family had great difficulty with him. You know, he was off. He really wanted to live the spiritual life. And they often didn't come home, and they had to find him somewhere. He was sitting somewhere or other deep in samadhi. So eventually they come and they give him to the Milarepa and say, look, you better look after him because he's gone now. He's left home. So Milarepa first gave him the precepts, the 5 precepts. This is a strange sequence, isn't it? Wisdom, going for refuge to the 3 jewels, meditation, and now the precepts. I suppose it's just the way it all fell out with him in some way. You can see that Milarepa's not following a system or a process of some, I can't think of the word. Never mind. He's not following this, set idea. He gives him what he needs at the time when he needs it. So he's a really great teacher from that point of view. Anyway, he gets on really well. And Milarepa does another song. And then Milarepa then gave the boy the complete initiation and verbal instructions. After practicing them, the boy attained superlative experience and realization. He was known as one of the heart sons of the Jetson, and he's called Repa Sangyejap. Okay, so that's the story. So obviously we can't go into all the teachings, so I've just got to decide what we're going to look at first. We better look at the beginning bit when there's that playful idea that, I've got a friend, his name's Bodhicitta. Well, where is he? He's in here. He's in my body. And and then the boy says, do you mean consciousness is mind itself and that the physical body is the house of the mind? Yeah, that's right. So the boy says, how many are there? You can have many people in a house, so are there many minds? Now, this is very interesting because Milarepa doesn't tell him the answer. So this is something that I think is really important, that very often you've probably seen it happen. You probably do it yourself if you're an order member, Vajrayana, Nagamani. You're at a class and somebody asks you a question, you know the answer, so you give the answer. Yeah, it's a dead easy thing to do, and they're grateful because you told them the answer. Not always the best thing to do, though. Sometimes it's better not to give them the answer and to ask them to look into it themselves. I remember that happened quite a lot when I was with Bhante Sangharakshita on question-answer sessions and seminars. We did many question-answer sessions, 9 of them altogether, each one 8 days long. When order members were studying to be Mitra study leaders. In those days, there were 9 lecture series we studied. And we went and studied them. And every evening we had question answers with Bhante. So I did loads and loads of them. And I remember sometimes I was really interested in could Metta Bhavana take you into the jhanas? And he didn't answer. He said, well, find it out for yourself. Look at your own experience. I should have said, Bhante, I never get into jhana. That's why I'm asking you, but I didn't. But anyway, that's the kind. He did that a lot. If there was anything we could answer for ourselves by looking at our own experience, he didn't answer the question, which is really good teaching method, actually. Because then you're asking people to do something that they can do. They're not that they don't become really dependent upon you for everything, and then they start to become independent. They start to look at their own experience and learn from that, which is really important. So he says, well, you better find out. So off he goes. And he does. He finds something out. Anyway, he finds something really interesting. So he comes back next morning, day 2. I observed it carefully and found out that I only have one mind. So he's found out for himself. He's asked, are there one mind or many minds? And he's found out for himself there's one mind, which is really good, isn't it? I observed it carefully, yeah. Even though one wants to, one cannot kill this mind. I found that interesting. Why would you want to? I don't quite understand that idea, but you can't kill it. I can understand the next one. However much one wishes to dismiss it, it will not go away. Stop going on. Stop chattering away, mind. I know a bit of peace and quiet. No, just carries on talking away to you. We have very little control over our mind. We talk about our mind, but is it our mind, or does our mind own us? If one tries to catch it, if one tries to catch it, it cannot be grasped, nor can it be held by pressing it. If you want it to remain, it will not stay. If you release it, it will not go. You try to gather it up, it cannot be picked up. You try to see it, it cannot be seen. You try to understand it, it cannot be known. If you think it is an existing entity and cast it off, it will not leave you. If you think that it is non-existent, you feel it running on. Okay, so it's a weird thing, the mind. It's very strange. I'm sure you know that you have very little control over the mind. And when you try to find the mind, you simply can't find it. So why is that? So I did this seminar with Bhante, 1976, when I was a little bit older than the shepherd, not much older. So I'm going to read you what Bhante says about this song. So the shepherd says, however much one wants to dismiss it, it will not go away. You try to see it, it cannot be seen. Bhante says, so this mind is so active, so mysteriously alive. It's doing all these things, but you can't even see the mind. Why is that? You can't see the mind because what sees is the mind. So therefore, what you see cannot be the mind. Therefore, you cannot see the mind because it is the mind that sees. Whatever you see is non-mind, not the mind itself. The mind is the seer. For the same reason, in the same way, you can't catch the mind. You can't pick it up. Then he says, the mind eludes you, or eludes itself, because you means mind, doesn't it? You means mind. You try to understand it, it cannot be known. How can you understand your own mind? It is the mind that is trying to understand the mind. So what you understand is not the mind. You may understand a very great deal, but inasmuch as the understander is the mind itself, the mind remains unknown. It lurks in the background. You can never see the mind, touch the mind, understand the mind, because it is the mind itself which is doing these things. It sort of slips round, as it were. You think you sort of caught hold of the mind, as it were, out there as an object, but it sort of whips round and becomes a subject. So you haven't seen it, you haven't understood, it's eluded you. So yeah, I don't know if you ever tried to do this. No doubt you'll do it now after this. You'll sit down in meditation and think, mind, where are you? What are you? And try to grasp it and so on, and you'll find, you've probably done this already, you cannot. Then the boy says, if you think it's an existing entity and cast it off, it will not leave you. Bhante says, what has really happened? What has the young shepherd discovered? What is it that he's begun to see, to realize, or to get a glimpse of? You can't know the mind. But also, you can't know in a sense that you can't know the mind, yes? No. I'll read that again. But also, you can't know in a sense that you can't know the mind, yes? You can't know the mind. This is what he's really getting at. But why can't you know the mind? You are the mind in a way. I mean, you can't know yourself. Of course, one has to look into this question of what you mean by know. The assumption is a dualistic knowing as a subject and an object. So, if within the framework of subject and object, taking this framework as absolute, you as subject try to know yourself as object, or mind as subject tries to understand mind as object, it's impossible. So it's all to do with the subject-object dichotomy, that's the way we live. That's the framework we're in. I'm a subject and you're objects. You're a subject, I'm an object. From your point of view, this microphone is an object. And then because everything out there is an object, I tend to think of my mind as being an object too. So then I try to understand the mind as if it were an object. And that's where it gets really weird, because it's not. It's the subject. And even calling it a subject almost makes it into a thing. You know, there's this thing called the subject, but there's no such thing as the mind. There's just consciousness. I've been doing some interviews with a very clever order member recently, a guy called Advaya Chitta, whose name means non-dual mind. And we did a session on consciousness and rebirth. And he said, well, there's no body in there looking out. He talked about, what did he call a space? An aware space. That's what we've got, an aware space, but there's nobody in that space. There's just awareness, consciousness, and you can't really know what it is because everything happens within that space. Yes. So then Banshee says, then the boy says, please be kind enough to explain the meaning of mind. Banshee says, you see what is happening with this young shepherd. He's trying to grapple with this subject-object problem, really, yes? But in a way, you can't grapple with it, because if you've got a subject-object out there, well, subjects and objects are both objects, and you remain as a subject. I bet you didn't understand that. I'll just read it again slowly. But if you've got a subject-object out there, well, subject and object are both objects, and you remain as a subject, so that you're still within this dualistic framework. You can't really think about it. No, I can't. You can't reason about it. You can't do anything about it. You can only just stop, yes? And if you stop, there's some possibility of the spontaneity, the natural spontaneity of the mind, which is neither subject or object, manifesting. And this is the point of the Maha Mudra. That's what the Maha Mudra is all about. Realizing mind, and the pointing too. When the guru points the mind out to you, because you've got this subject-object dichotomy going on, and that's the way you see it, you can't see the mind. It's impossible because you're looking at it from the subject-object point of view. You can only really see it, experience it properly, when the subject-object dichotomy falls away. And that's why in the first song, he says, first song, he says, in the same way, one cannot see in full the nature of the mind, though he may have a glimpse of it, if it has been pointed out by others. So that's the pointing out. If one relies not on this one glimpse, because that one glimpse doesn't really tell you it, it puts you in a state of bewilderment. It's like, oh, yeah, like that. And then, but if one relies not on this one glimpse, but continues searching for the nature of mind, he will see it fully in the end. Dear shepherd, in this way, you should observe your mind. So that's the main teaching, the main practice that Milarepa gives to the young boy. So I did a seminar on this a couple of years ago at Adhisthana. There were I think there were 6 of us all together, 6 order members. And we did it over 5 days. And I thought what we would do is we did the first story for the first couple of days. And then the last 3 days were this one. And by then we were into the retreat and we were really communicating well together. And so I thought, we'll do this pointing out. We'll try and do the Maha Mudra together. And we read this from Bante. And he says, where he says, you can't really think about it. You can't reason with it. You can't do anything about it. You can only just stop. Yes. And we did. We stopped talking. We just sat there. I don't know how long for, but we were just sitting there wondering, in a state of wonderment, sort of like, yeah, looking out the window there was this just marvelous sense of openness and not spontaneity so much, but openness and not knowing. There was this great sense of not knowing anything really, not really understanding the situation we're in. And every now and then someone would go, is it like this? And we go, kind of, not really though. And so we, every, I don't know, maybe half an hour, someone would say, I think, yeah. And then they'd say something, we go, yeah, maybe, let's follow that through. So we followed that through for a while, and then we ended up in this space again. Wonderful. It was really great. It was a great day. Yeah. So then Milarepa gives this, he gives, you look for your mind, the song that I've just read to you there. So what's happening here, Banshi says? Milarepa is talking about mind in a somewhat different sense. Neither subject nor object. But the mind that Milarepa is now talking about is the mind which is neither subject nor object. In other words, the mind that cannot actually be spoken about. But if you were to speak at all or sing at all, you cannot help at least appearing to make that mind, which is neither subject nor object, into an object. But as long as you bear that in mind and not misled by words, it's all right. You may get a glimpse. So that's the main teaching, really. And I thought I'd just read you something from a contemporary master on Maha Mudra, a guy called Ken MacLeod. He says, talking about Maha Mudra. Maha Mudra then means great seal because it is a seal that marks all of experience. What is it that stamps all of experience? What feature does all experience have in common? All experience is groundless, open, empty. All experience is groundless, open, empty. This is very advanced teaching, isn't it, for a Saturday morning? Anyway, back to Ken MacLeod. Well, you can say, well, this floor doesn't feel empty to me. And you're right, it feels very solid. But emptiness refers to a way of experiencing things. In other words, the Mahamudra is not saying the world doesn't really exist. It's, floors don't really exist. They're really empty. Not saying that. He's talking about your experience of things, not how things are out there. It feels very solid. But emptiness refers to a way of experiencing things. And when you experience things in this way, it is such a powerful experience, that you will almost always come out of it saying, oh, this is how things really are. This is reality. Even so, we can't get away from the fact that it is a way of experiencing things. And the next thing he says is really important, I think. And I think often we fall foul of a misunderstanding. One of the things we have to pay careful attention to is that in the English and American traditions of philosophy, we are used to thinking in terms of ontology. That is, whether things exist or not. Whereas Buddhist thought is almost always based on epistemology. That is, how do we experience things? Because the Buddha always talks about experience. When he said all conditioned things are experience, he meant all your experience of conditioned things is impermanent. Yeah, not that all things are impermanent necessarily, because we don't know. I mean, I was doing a reflection workshop in France, I think it was, Paris. And, I said, all things are impermanent. And somebody said, well, the moon's been there a long time and probably there when I die. So it's not really impermanent. And I thought, actually, yeah. How do we know the moon's impermanent? What scientific knowledge do we have about that? From our point of view, the world is permanent. The world is permanent, and so is the moon and the sun. They're permanent from our experiential point of view, although they come and go. But that's not what the Buddha was saying, and it's not what Maha Mudra is saying. Maha Mudra doesn't care very much about things out there. It's your experience that matters. So your experience of things is empty. All experiences, there's no ground to it. Yeah. How long, I should stop really, shouldn't I? How can I stop this talk? I'll stop by just reading you that the end of the beginning of the final song. I bow down at the feet of Marpa, he who received grace from Naropa and Medripa. Those who practice the Dharma with their mouths taught much and seem to know much teaching. But when the time comes for the perceiver to leave the deadened body, the mouth-bound preacher into space is thrown. This isn't the song that I thought I was reading, but I'm into it now. So, when the clear light shines, it is cloaked with blindness. The chance to see the Dharmakaya at the time of death is lost through fear and confusion. Even though one spends his life in studying the canon, it helps not at the moment of the mind's departure. The final bit of the song. With the power of kindness and compassion, and with the altruistic vow of the bodhicitta, he can see direct and clear the truth of the enlightened path, of which nothing can be seen, yet all is clearly visioned. He sees how wrong were the fears and hopes of his own mind. Without a rival, he reaches the place of Buddha. Without seeing, he visions the Dharmakaya. Without effort, he does all things naturally. Dear son, the virtue seeker, bear this instruction in your mind. That's a good ending, isn't it? That's a good way to end the talk. Okay, so what I'm going to try and do now, before we do anything else, is see if I can... not quite sure how to do this. Let's go to YouTube. Here we are. Now I need to find out a way to share screen. There we are, share screen. Let's see if I can do that. There we are. Boom, boom, boom. Share. Are you seeing it? Can you see it? Okay, let's just have a little bit of it. Can you hear it? There are lots of them on YouTube. That was a very Tibetan one. And you could see it was just one tune over and over again, almost like a mantra. Yeah, there are others. That was a very Tibetan-ish one, but Kempo Tulsrim has done, he's got many Western societies. There's this guy called Jim Scott who has put many of the Milarepa songs to music. And there's a beautiful one I found this morning of a woman singing, again with backing like that one had, instrumental backing, really gorgeous. Of course, Milarepa didn't have an instrument, so he sang completely without any backing or anything. But you can imagine his voice was a bit like that, can't you? So let's see if there are any questions, because I know if we break into groups, Sia, Vinton, and Sia and Marcus will disappear. So let's keep them on for a bit longer. Any questions arising out of that talk? Vajradevi, unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, a couple of quite practical things, really. So the different kinds of wisdom, 6 or 8 kinds, including this Hassa wisdom. Could you say, I think you did say where you found that. I think it was an early Buddhist list, but I would really like to follow that up.
I'll have to look again. I tried to find it this morning, but I couldn't. I went on to Access to Insight and put smiling wisdom, laughing wisdom, 6 different kinds of wisdom, and it didn't come up with anything. So I'm not sure how I find it. I'm pretty sure it was in the Majjhima Nikaya. And the Buddha was talking about Sariputra and his wisdom. That's all I can remember. If I find it, I'll write to you, but I'm not sure how to find it now.
Yeah, no, I've had similar things with hearing something referenced about the I think it was the 6 or 7 types of concepts that an early Buddhist list that the teacher I sat with in Burma has talked about, and I haven't been able to find them. But again, they're really interesting. Just to be able to look in a bit more depth.
Yes.
But yeah, if you do find them,
if I do, I'll let you know.
Thank you. Yeah, and then the other one was the seminar that you were talking about that you quoted Bhante from. Has that been made into the book The Yogi's Joy, or is it not available in book form?
It probably has, but let me just have a look. It's in this one, Milarepa and the Art of Discipleship, and it's got the Yogi's Joy in it, but it's also got the Shepherd's Search for Mind and Trungpa's Journey to Enlightenment. So yeah.
Art of Discipleship.
I'm glad you mentioned that seminar, because I wanted to say to people that here I am giving these short commentaries on text, but often Bhante's done a seminar on them, and if you're really interested in text and want to get to know them better, go on to Free Buddhist Audio. You get the menu bar at the top, text, go to text, and then you've got all of Bhante's seminars that have been transcribed into print, and you can read them. They can be a bit frustrating because, a lot of them we gave in the early days of the movement, 74, 75, 76. That's 1975, etc. And he, people were really ignorant. They didn't really know very much. He was trying to get this Sangha together, and they talk about all sorts of stuff, which is really not relevant to us nowadays. But in amongst all that, you get some really, really good teachings, like the one I just read to you there, really, really good. And if you want to get to know text better, that's a really good way of doing it. I learned how to read texts by reading Bhante's seminars. Yeah, because you do have to learn how to read them. Yeah. There are 3 great movements of Buddhism. The early texts, we now call them Shravakayana. They used to be called Hinayana, but Hina is a derogatory term, means small, little, mean, petty. So we now call it Shravakayana, which Shravaka means hearer. and then Mahayana, and then later Vajrayana, and very, very big in Tibet. It's an Indo-Tibetan kind of movement, really. And so Milarepa was a Vajrayana teacher and practitioner, as was Padmasambhava, as was Atisha. Quite a lot of the guys on our refuge tree are from the Vajrayana tradition. And we draw on it quite a lot. So Milarepa is very, very important to Bhante, very important to our movement. He's done loads of seminars on Milarepa. So yeah, very important. The thing about Vajrayana is that they conceived of themselves as being a higher teaching. So the Shravakayana were for beginners. Mahayana is better, for people who are practiced. But then Vajrayana was the real thing, So you got this idea, which isn't really correct, because Mahamudra, I think Bhante once said that Mahamudra or Ati Yoga is really just basically mindfulness. Just noticing what's happening. That's what mindfulness really is. But it's a wonderful, rich school, and we get order members in our order who I think of as tantrikas, people who really inspired by the tantra, by the mythology, the symbology of the tantra, Padmasambhava and the skull cups and red darkinis and so on. So yeah, it's quite a big part of our movement. Comes out Buddha field, I'm pretty sure, will be pretty Vajrayana heavy, with its long pujas and rituals and so on. So yeah, it's definitely part of our movement. Yeah. I'm going to finish actually with, as we don't seem to have any more questions, with carrying on from the Vajrayana. Years and years ago, Bhante gave a talk at the LBC on Padmasambhava. It was on a Padmasambhava day, and he gave it off the cuff. He hadn't prepared it. In that talk, he talked about the three exoteric refuges and the three esoteric refuges, which is an idea from the Vajrayana. So the exoteric refuges are Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. But in the Vajrayana, you get this idea of the esoteric, which is the secret refuges. And they are, instead of Buddha, you have Guru. So you know this idea in Tibet. You get this idea that you have to conceive of your teacher as the Buddha, and do everything he says. So the Buddha, the secret refuge is the Guru. The secret refuge of the Dharma is the Yidam, which is the Bodhisattva or Buddha figure you take at initiation, Abhisheka, and order members take on their ordination. So it might be Avalokiteshvara or Tara or Padmasambhava, and that's who you're with, that's your Dharma. And then Sangha's a really interesting one. Sangha is the Darkini, the red Darkini, usually red, naked young woman holding a skull cup with blood and drinking the blood from the skull cup, dancing on bones, human bones. What does that represent? The red Darkini represents love, affection, passion, and release, in a way, all those things and probably more. But in that lecture, Bhante made a distinction between the Dharmapala and the Darkini. So the Dharmapala, Pala means protector, the protector of the Dharma. And sometimes we as Buddhists need to be Dharmapalas. We need to protect the Dharma from wrong views and so on. And in the great stupa at Sanchi, you've got 4 entrances, east, south, west, north. And above the door, you've got Ehi Pasiko, which means come and see. It's welcoming you in. But at the same time, there are 2 Dharmapalas at the door, preventing any negative influences from coming in. And so sometimes we have to be Dharmapalas, really, really stand up for the Dharma. But within the Sangha, you shouldn't have to be a Dharmapala. You don't need Dharmapalas within the Sangha. Within the Sangha, we should relate to each other as Darkinis. So our heart is open with affection and love and open, completely open. That's another thing about the Darkinis. They're naked, they're completely open, transparent. So that's the way we should be relating to each other within the Sangha. So Dharmapala outside, Darkini inside. Yeah. And I think we'll end on that note.